raise the vibration.
Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be talking with you about my reusable pads. If you've seen my minimalism everything I own video, I mentioned them there briefly, but I wanted to make another video going a bit more in depth. So I first started using reusable pads about a year and a half ago when I was living in Senegal. I was walking in the market one day and I came across a table that had a beautiful display of reusable pads and reusable diapers. So I started talking to the woman at the table who's the founder of this NGO, and what they do is they employ local women in the community who they train, and then these women are who manufacture the reusable pads and diapers. So I'll link the organization below. Their name is Appy Afrique, and they do really great work. They hold different events and workshops all over Africa to kind of get people to question the taboo of menstruation and to get women more comfortable with talking about it, and also selling these reusable pads and diapers as well. So after hearing all this, I immediately bought my first pack of 3. I tried them out and I ended up really liking them. So over time I went back and got more, and now I only use reusable pads. I don't use any disposables, and I have 9 total, and I find that that's a good amount to have without ever having a shortage during my period. Okay, so now to talk about the pads themselves. I'll first answer some common questions that I had before I started using reusable pads, and then I'll explain to you the pros and cons of using them. So question number 1, what are they made out of? There's different kinds of reusable pads out there. I've never tried any other brand, but the ones I use are made of organic cotton, this African fabric, and these little buttons that snap them into place. So they work just like regular disposable pads that have wings. You put them in your underwear and you fold the wings back and they snap into place like this. Question number 2, how much do they cost? For mine, a pack of 3 cost $14, and I know it sounds a little pricey for pads, but it actually saves you money in the long run because you don't need to go out and buy pads every single month. So $14 for a pack of 3, and if you want, you can even make your own. I have a friend who made them in Peace Corps, and she said it's not too difficult. Question number 3, how often do I need to change them? With these pads, it's recommended you change them every 3 to 4 hours, but of course it depends on how heavy your period is. So if it's lighter, you can go longer without changing them, and if it's heavier, you'll need to change them sooner than 3 to 4 hours. Question number 4, how long do they last? So with these pads, they say they last up to 5 years, which I think is pretty normal for reusable pads. And of course, that also depends on how often you use them. How do they feel? For me, reusable pads actually feel a lot better than disposable pads because they're made of cotton and they're not made of this synthetic material, so there's actually more airflow. They also have different sizes, so if your period's heavier or if you're going to bed at night, they make bigger ones you can buy. And if it's really light, then they have panty liners as well. But I just have the regular medium size, and I find that that's all I need. How do you wash them? So with reusable pads, if they're lightly used, you can just throw them into your regular laundry, throw them into the wash, and then to dry them, you dry them on low, or you can hang them up to dry in the sun. If there's more blood on them, then you can first soak them in cold water to get the blood out and to make sure the stain doesn't set, and then you can throw them into the wash. So what I actually got in the habit of doing in Senegal, because I didn't have a washer or dryer, was I actually hand washed them. So I just used regular hand soap, wash them in the sink in cold water, and then hang them up to dry in the sun. I actually prefer this method, which I'll discuss a little bit later, but yeah, that's what I do. Are they sanitary? So I kind of think that we're led to believe that disposable pads and tampons are a lot more sanitary because they're wrapped in nice plastic packaging, they're bleached white, sometimes they're even scented. But disposable products were not invented because we had a need for something more sanitary. They were invented just for convenience. So, I mean, disposable pads, they're made of cotton, you wash them and dry them before you use them again. So there really is no difference between these and your underwear. So there's no reason to believe that reusable pads are not sanitary, and no, your blood is not dirty. Okay, so now that I've covered all the questions that I had before I started using reusable pads, I'll now explain to you the pros and cons based on my experience using them. I'll start with the cons because there really aren't many. So the first con is obviously the price. The upfront cost of buying reusable pads is definitely more expensive. Like I said, a pack of 3 was $14, so in total this set costs $42. And then I also bought this little carrying case, which makes it really easy. If you're traveling and you don't have time to wash them, you can just put them in here and wash them when you get home. So anyway, that's definitely a con because they're more expensive up front, but at the same time, I'll explain in a little bit why the price is actually a pro, because $42 in total is not bad because these last 5 years, whereas having to go to the store every month and buy new reusable pads or new disposable pads or tampons, that cost really adds up. So yes, the upfront cost is a con, but in the long run, the price is actually a pro. Con number 2, and the last con that I can think of, is convenience. So for me, this is the biggest con because obviously it's a lot easier to just use disposable pads. You use them, you throw them away, you're done. You don't need to take the time to wash them and dry them and all that stuff. So obviously it's more convenient to use disposable products. But that being said, things that are easy always come at a certain cost. And in this case, the cost is to the environment, your health, and even your wallet. So I know that I'm making these cons all sound like pros, but that's because I really can't think of many negative points on using reusable pads because I love them and I really think every woman should be using them. So yeah, those are all the cons I can think of, but now I'll talk to you about all the benefits of using them and why I like them so much. So pro number 1 is that they work better. So in the past, I've had a couple times where I've bled through my disposable pads, and that's literally never happened with the reusable pads before. So I feel comfortable wearing them at night and not worrying about bleeding through the pad or it getting on my underwear or anything. And that has definitely happened to me in the past with disposable pads. So from my experience, they work better. So pro number 2, and probably the most important, is that they're so much better for the environment. So I want you to first think about the amount of menstrual products you use every month and think about how many menstrual products a woman uses in her entire lifetime. Now think about the billions of women on Earth who menstruate. And finally, think about the fact that for disposable pads to decompose, it takes over 500 years. So these products end up sitting in landfills, they end up polluting the oceans and even the air, and they're just really bad for the health of the environment and the health of people as well. So that's definitely a benefit of using reusable pads. You don't have to worry about hurting the environment because cotton rags, for example, take 1 to 5 months to decompose if they're left in the environment, and microorganisms can break them down because they're made of a natural material. So it's definitely an advantage to the environment to use reusable pads, and that's the reason I feel so strongly about using them. So pro number 3 is the price. I know I mentioned that this is a con, but that's only because up front, yes, it's more expensive to use reusable pads, but like I said, in the long run, it's a lot cheaper. So again, think about the thousands of products you use over your lifetime, and imagine if you could cut that out completely and just have like a one-time cost of $42, or I guess it would be, so these last every 5 years, so every 5 years you spend $42. Just during the years that you're menstruating, of course. It's not like you need these your entire life from the moment you're born to the moment you die. So the price is definitely a pro, and if you're buying your reusable pads through an NGO like I did that's doing work to employ women and to put girls back in school, then your dollar goes even further. So pro number 4 to using reusable pads is that they're a lot better for your health. So as you probably know, your skin is permeable, and the skin around your vagina is especially permeable. And disposable pads contain over 50 chemicals that can easily enter your bloodstream. Disposable pads are also whitened with chlorine bleach, which produces a toxic byproduct called dioxin. And dioxin has been shown to cause a lot of health problems like hormonal imbalances, infertility, and even cancer. So that's not good, and it's a lot easier to just stay away from if you use reusable pads. A lot of women are also sensitive to the bleaching agents in pads. They feel irritable, and they've also been shown to cause yeast infections, which when women switch to reusable pads, the yeast infections go away. So it's a lot better for your health to just stick with natural materials, stick with reusable pads, and stay away from the synthetic products that are in disposable pads. So pro number 5 is that reusable pads are a lot more comfortable, which I already talked about in the Q&A when I answered the question, how do they feel? And finally, pro number 6 is that reusable pads are really cute and customizable. This isn't that important, obviously, because no one even sees them except you, probably. But yeah, I mean, these caught my eye because they're made of this really beautiful African fabric. And this is the only brand I use, but from what I've seen online, it seems like every brand kind of has bright patterns and different colors that you can choose from, which kind of just makes it more fun to use them. I guess it's like the reason why we feel the need to buy cute underwear, even though not many people are gonna be seeing it. So that kind of summarizes how I feel about reusable pads. I really think that every woman who menstruates should be using reusable pads over disposable ones. Maybe in a future video I'll talk about tampons and the Diva Cup, but I actually don't use those right now. I only use reusable pads, and I've never had the desire to go back to disposables. They're really great, and I understand that when we're in the habit of using disposables ever since we first start menstruating, it sounds kind of gross to be using the same cloth over and over again and just washing it, and I understand that it sounds weird and it doesn't seem sanitary, but we really just need to change our mentality around that, because periods and blood are still kind of taboo, and there's really no reason they should be. Your period isn't gross, your blood isn't dirty, so that's one of the reasons I really like At the Athlete, the NGO who's doing this work, because they're really empowering girls in Africa to be able to have more open conversations about their periods, which is helping girls get back in school, because a lot of times girls miss school because they have their periods. So they're doing really great work. I encourage you to check them out I'll link their website below, like I said. But yeah, that's how I feel. It might seem tedious to have to wash them every time you use them, but like I said, it's definitely worth it because of all the advantages you get from using them. And I actually prefer hand washing them because it really makes me feel a connection to my body, because your period really is a sign of your overall health. And when you're just bleeding into a disposable pad and then throwing it away without really looking at it, you don't really have a good feel for what your period's like. And it is important to know the color of your blood, how thick it is, the different consistencies, and I really feel more of a connection with my body when I use these products. So maybe that's just me, but it's another advantage of using them. And I highly recommend you to try them out if you haven't. Just get 1 or 2 at first to try out and see if you like it. But yeah, there you go. That's my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it got you to think or inspired you in some way towards reusable products.